off this list, in our number 10 spot, we have the FAIRMONT BANFF Spring Hotel. This Canadian hotel is absolutely legendary, but despite the spooky tales, tourism remains as high as ever. This hotel was built in 1888 in order to encourage tourists and to sell train tickets, and while it certainly did just that, this chateau-style hotel was only the icing on the cake to a trip to the gorgeous Rocky Mountains and all that waits in the Banff National Park. Through the years, though, several guests have had some haunting stories to tell, which included reports of ghost sightings. These ghosts are thought to reside in the hotel, and they include a bride who allegedly fell down the stone staircase during her wedding, which led to her untimely departure, or the legend of Sam the Bellman. This legend has it that Sam worked at the hotel until 1975, and before leaving, he claimed that he would come back to haunt the hotel. It is said that his spirit can be seen in the hotel, helping people with their bags. In our number 9 spot today, we have Zunantunich. This location sits deep in the jungles of Belize, located less than a mile from the border of Guatemala. It has an unbelievably rich history, as it is an ancient Maya ruin that has been abandoned for the last 1,000 years. In 1890, this site had its modern discovery, and since then it has been an important site for archaeology, an amazing tourist attraction, but also it is said to be a hotspot for the paranormal. It is said that the site is haunted by a female ghost. She has black hair and glowing red eyes. Referred to as the Stone Lady, it is said that she was first spotted by one of the first research teams in the area in 1893, and since then she has been frequently seen by the tallest building complex called El Castillo. No one exactly knows the story behind the Stone Lady considering the history of this site, but many believe she may have been a part of a ritual sacrifice, which was a tradition and spiritual practice done by the ancient Maya civilization. In our number 8 spot today, we have Burg Eltz. This German castle dates back to 1157, so it's no surprise that there are many myths and legends surrounding it. The most common tale is that of a young countess named Agnes. Agnes was betrothed or promised to another noble, but after meeting him, she called off their future wedding. Apparently this guy was the worst, and also even if he wasn't, no one could really blame her for calling off a wedding she didn't want to have. But of course, things quickly went awry. This noble guy was mad that she had rejected him, so the scorned lover laid siege to the castle. Agnes fought to defend her home, but she passed away during the battle. That is the story behind why her spirit is said to haunt the Burg Eltz castle. Many say the strongest presence is felt in her former bedroom. It is said that her spirit is quite mournful, and apparently her battle armor and axe remain on display as well. In our number 7 spot today, we have the Eden Brown Estate. This estate is located in Nevis, which is the smaller of the two islands that comprise the nation of St. Kitts and Nevis in the Caribbean. It is said that despite having just as much to offer, Nevis is often overshadowed by St. Kitts. That is, until people hear of this ghostly haunting. Eden Brown Estate is a former plantation that now lies in ruin. The estate was once owned by a businessman who was going to give the property to his daughter as a wedding present. Legend goes that on the wedding day there was a very mysterious duel between the groom and his best man that ended up leaving both of the men dead. Because of this tragic happening on what should have been her wedding day, the businessman's daughter remained unmarried and alone for the rest of her life, which meant that when she passed, there was no one to leave the estate to. Now visitors of the estate report seeing the spirit of a reclusive woman as she roams about the grounds. Aside from this story, who knows what other kind of horrors and absolute tragedies that this place has seen. In our number 6 spot today, we have Bangar Fort. Bangar Fort is located in India, just 100 miles southwest of Delhi. This place is pretty much completely abandoned, as it is said to have had a curse placed on it. Apparently many years ago, a sorcerer tried to woo a local princess, in which she rejected him. He got so upset that he decided that cursing this town was his only course of action. I just have to mention that none of these are a normal reaction to being rejected, and calling it an overreaction would honestly be an understatement. This fort now is closed to visitors after sundown because of all the spooky happenings that go on here. This fort is extremely beautiful, so it's no wonder the paranormal doesn't keep people out. People have reported having extremely strong feelings of an otherworldly presence, and even some have reported hearing voices that are seemingly coming from nowhere. In our number 5 spot today, we have the WHALEY House. The WHALEY House is located in San Diego and it was built in 1857. The site that this family house was built on was actually the location of San Diego's first public gallows, so as you can imagine, that's a pretty good backstory for a haunted site. Right after moving in, Thomas Whaley reported that he could hear the footsteps of Yankee Jim Robinson, who had been hanged at the gallows just 4 short years before the house was built. After moving in, the Whaley family began to experience a bunch of family tragedies, many of which actually happened inside of the house. The Whaley house is now a museum, and apparently the family members continue to haunt the site. These paranormal occurrences are apparently often accompanied by the smells of cigar smoke and heavy perfumes. In our number 4 spot today, we have Obvodny Canal. Obvodny Canal is located in St. Petersburg, Russia, and this whole thing just really creeps me out. This man-made canal was built in the late 18th century, and ever since then there has been extremely strange occurrences at this location. Construction workers would complain of headaches. They would also sometimes even have random outbursts of violent behavior that was uncharacteristic of them. But the craziest, most unsettling part is what has given this location full cursed status. Many of these people have attempted to take their own lives. Sadly, most of the attempts were successful, but the few people who have been saved have explained that they have no idea why they did it. They say that they didn't really have intentions beforehand, and some have even said that they felt some sort of invisible force pulling them into the water. Apparently there are some sinister souls that live beneath the surface of the water, and there have even been reports of seeing a lady in white in the water before she suddenly disappears. Long story short, remind me to just never ever go here. In our number 3 spot today, we have the Eastern State Penitentiary. The Eastern State Penitentiary is located in Philadelphia, and of course it used to be a prison, but it is now an abandoned and extremely haunted house. This prison used to house some pretty big profile prisoners such as Al Capone and Willie Sutton, but it was different from the American prisons we are used to now. This is because this prison was entirely separate incarceration. The inmates would live, sleep, eat, and everything else alone. When they were removed from their cells, they would have hoods placed over their heads as well. Considering all we now know about how detrimental isolation is, this of course must have taken an immense toll on the prisoners. Beside this, there were also some pretty gruesome and horrible punishments in this prison, such as having prisoners' tongues chained to their wrists. I'm honestly not even sure how you would do that, but apparently it was a thing. This prison now sees thousands of voluntary visitors every year, and there have been plenty of reports of some creepy paranormal happenings. These reports include seeing shadowy figures, hearing creepy laughter that doesn't belong to anyone living, and hearing footsteps throughout the prison. I feel like considering all that went on when this prison was active, it truly does make sense that this building would be a haunted one. In our number 2 spot today, we have Raynham Hall. Raynham Hall is located in England and was built around 1620, and it is a large building on 7,000 acres, which is obviously quite impressive. The tale that follows this haunted building is that of Lady Dorothy Dolly Townsend and her husband Viscount Turnip Townsend. I can't believe a couple with the nicknames Dolly and Turnip have an evil history, but unfortunately they do. The story goes that Turnip kept Dolly locked up in the house, which is obviously just terrible and very cruel. After her passing, it's no wonder she decided to stick around and haunt the house. Apparently there was a photo taken of her ghost in 1930, and it is said that no one has ever been able to prove it was a fake, so all you photo experts out there, take a look and let me know what you think. A lot of the places on this list now serve as haunted houses, but apparently this one is still lived in by the Raynham family. Hence the name. In our number 1 spot today, we have Forsyth Park. One thing I didn't know is that apparently the entire city of Savannah, Georgia is a pretty haunted place due to the creepy tunnels that are located underneath the city. But one of the most notable, highly haunted places within the city is Forsyth Park. Apparently there used to be a hospital across the street, and there would be autopsies performed in the tunnels below the park. I personally feel like autopsies are already creepy enough, so I'm not sure if conducting them in an underground tunnel was exceptionally necessary, but hey, I can't change the past. Because of this scary practice, the park has seen a lot of paranormal activity since these days, and it usually is the sort of place where 1 second you'll see a strange figure, but as soon as you blink or look away, it disappears just as quickly as it suddenly appeared. Starting off this list, in our number 10 spot, we have Grand Union Hotel. This hotel resides in Fort Benton, which is one of the oldest towns in Montana, and it was first established by the French-American fur traders Auguste and Pierre Choteau in 1846. While much of the town has been dismantled by the years, the Grand Union Hotel still stands, and it is among the oldest in the town, with its initial build taking place in 1882. There are many ghost stories and haunting tales that have come from this hotel, but I will tell you one of my favorites. Apparently, this hotel might be the home to a paranormal horse. A phantom horse. It really doesn't get more interesting than that. People have reported hearing the stomping of hooves, and they believe that this horse belonged to a cowboy who, one night after having a few too many pops, tried to ride his horse up the main staircase before he was shot by the hotel manager. In our number 9 spot today, we have 2223 Montana Ave in Billings. This address seems a little suspiciously specific, but the story behind this haunting is quite a tragic accident. In 1945, on December 8th, an airplane that was transporting World War II soldiers who were returning home from war ended up crashing in a field east of Rocky Mountain College. 17 servicemen and 2 pilots lost their lives in this crash, while there were only 4 survivors. This is of course a lot of people, and at the time it was too many for the morgue to handle at one time, so the majority of the bodies needed to be stored somewhere else for the time being. This led to 13 of the bodies being held at a refrigerated warehouse of the local grocery store located at, you guessed it, 2223 Montana Ave. This address has had many different businesses come through its doors since this tragic story occurred, and with all these businesses, the same chilling stories have remained. Employees and customers have reported seeing the ghost of a man in a World War II era military uniform inside of this location. Considering the years it's been, it doesn't seem like he's going anywhere soon. In our number 8 spot today, we have Fort Peck Theater. This town dates back to the building of the Fort Peck Dam because the town was initially built to temporarily house the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, workers, and their families. In the 1930s, while building the amenities that would be needed, the Fort Peck Theater was also built in order to provide the residents with some entertainment. The theater is still used to this day, mostly for theatrical productions, but it's also full of paranormal entertainment as well. The theater is said to be haunted by a male spirit who appears wearing 1930s work clothes. Some visitors even report hearing sounds of men at work even when the theater is empty, and sometimes apparitions even appear in the dressing rooms. I just think that's the most theater thing ever. Ghosts in the dressing rooms? Shakespeare would love that. In our number 7 spot today, we have the Boulder Hot Springs Inn and Spa. This inn is located, of course, in Boulder, and it is actually a place that dates back to a time before Montana was even a state. This now historical landmark was initially created or recognized in 1881, and it was a place where businessmen, miners, and ranchers could all go, and here they could sort of mingle with each other. In this day and age, it is said that you might still be able to mingle with those guests from all of those years ago. As legend has it, this place is highly haunted. The most well-known of the ghosts here, however, is that of a woman named Simone. It is said that Simone sadly had her life taken in the hotel, and that her spirit now resides there. Visitors and staff alike have reported some really strange occurrences, like extreme temperature shifts, drastic changes in energy, and even the sound of children running through the halls when there is no one to be seen. In our number 6 spot today, we have St. Charles Hall. The oldest building on the Carroll College campus, which is located in Helena, is said to be St. Charles Hall, named after St. Charles Borromeo, who the college was actually initially named after. The building was originally constructed in 1904 and is mostly used as a dorm for students now, and those who reside in this dorm have quite the stories about the men's washroom on the 4th floor. This is said to have been the site of a horrible tale. Story goes that in 1964, a student blacked out while brushing their teeth, and as they fell, they hit their head on the sink in the bathroom. They were treated at the local hospital, but unfortunately passed from their injuries and complications. After this, students using that bathroom began to experience strange happenings. A glance in the mirror would have them seeing a young man standing behind them with a head wound. Some would turn on the faucet and see blood flowing rather than water. After years of these reports, the bathroom has apparently now been locked up and is no longer in use, but people still report hearing scraping sounds from the inside. In our number 5 spot today, we have the Many Glacier Hotel. The Many Glacier Hotel has sat in its home on the eastern shore of Swift Current Lake for over a century now, and with history like that, there is bound to be many a ghost story. Other hotels in the area too have talks and tales of hauntings, but none seem as active as the Many Glacier Hotel. A ghost hunter by the name of Karen Stevens has taken to documenting some of these paranormal stories. One of the most frightening is the tale of a young boy who apparently witnessed a woman woman in a red dress standing in his hotel room. Guests aren't the only ones, however. Employees too have had their own encounters. The most active room in the hotel is apparently room 308, where you can not only hear strange noises, but also see apparitions that vanish into thin air just as quickly as they appeared. In our number 4 spot today, we have the Daly Mansion. This mansion is located in Hamilton, and in its previous life, it was the farmhouse to the Copper King Marcus Daly. He purchased this home in 1886 and put it through some extensive renovations for it to become the sort of Georgian revival style that it still has today. In 1941, when Margaret Daly passed away, the house fell into disrepair after several years of being neglected, and this led to the state purchasing it in 1986. The state began restoration work on the property, and this is when many of the haunting tales started to spread. Smoking, of course, is not allowed in the home in this day and age, but many visitors to the home have experienced the distinct smell of a cigar smoke that seems to be coming from what was once the office of Marcus Daly. Not only this, but in the music room, there is a painting that just can't quite seem to stay on the wall, but no one has ever seen it fall off. Some even report to have seen the ghost of Mrs. Daly themselves. In our number 3 spot today, we have Grasshopper Glacier. This place is quite different than the others on this list, but for me, this place is the stuff of nightmares. Yeah, if you aren't a fan of bugs, you can go ahead and skip this one. If I were you, I would go. A glacier in Montana is the home to many grasshoppers and locusts. Yeah, imagine heading to a glacier, but you forgot bug spray. What a fool. Oh wait, I forgot. Grasshoppers, they don't care. They aren't mosquitoes, they're absolute savages. Appropriately named Grasshopper Glacier, the mile-long glacier near Crook City holds the remains of extinct grasshoppers. The only thing worse is if they all came back to life. These guys likely were in the middle of travel when they found themselves stuck in a blizzard, and now they're stuck for the foreseeable future. This is like a very forbidden version of one of those like scorpion lollipops. In our number 2 spot today, we have Virginia City. This town is often referred to as a ghost town due to the fact that as of 2020, the population sat just slightly over 200 people, and it is no surprise that this ghost town is said to be the home of some of Montana's most famous hauntings. Virginia City was first founded in 1863 by prospectors who originally named the area after the wife of Confederate President Jefferson Davis. The name was only changed when a judge, Judge G.G. Bissell, who was signing the town's registration, objected to the name and instead ruled it to be called Virginia. The town's population began to grow once people heard of the nearby gold deposits and discoveries. As the town grew, there wasn't sufficient law enforcement, which meant that there were a lot of vigilantes out there looking to take the law into their own hands. This led to many people who were suspected of being traveling robbers being hanged by said vigilante groups. By the time the 1940s rolled around, the town was in ruins. Charles and Sue Bovey ended up coming and buying up all the property they could, and the town now remains a tourist site, but not without some ghostly tales to spice up the story. One of the most well-known ghosts is that of a tall man in a blue Civil War soldier's coat, and he is often said to be found walking around the town's boardwalk at night, smoking as he strolls. Another one of the most famous sightings is that of a woman and a young girl. Little is known about their story, but they are often sighted by tourists. In our number 1 spot today, we have Deer Lodge. Deer Lodge at the old Montana Territorial Prison, now known as the Old Prison Museum, once held prisoners for over 100 years. It apparently was quite a lousy place during that time that was full and overcrowded and had terrible food, and it was just a very dangerous place. Many inmates took each other's lives here, and with all of the stories from when this was a prison, it's just clear that if any place were to be haunted, it would absolutely be this one. There even was a huge riot that broke out in 1959. Since this prison closed down in the 1970s, the tales haven't become any less grim. Visitors report hearing eerie noises, and some have even felt the sensation of being touched. Many people believe that the ghost of convicted killer Paul Eitner, known as Turkey Pete, still haunts cell number 1. He was incarcerated at the prison for 49 years before he passed away in 1967.
Number 10. Driscoll Hotel, Austin. While there are many reportedly haunted hotels in Texas, this one seems to top many lists for the most ghostly activity. Most of this seems to stem from the very chilling stories of room 525. In the 1880s, there was a young couple that was having their wedding at the hotel, or at least that was the plan. The groom got cold feet and left the bride at the altar. Now, heartbroken, she ran upstairs to their suite, room 525, and took her own life. And it said she still walks the halls in her long white gown. But that isn't the end of the story, because in 1991, another bride was spurned at the altar, and after going on a shopping spree with the groom's stolen credit card, she too returned to room 525 and took her own life. Since then, guests have seen her carrying a pistol and walking into the room, all without ever opening the door. So don't stay in room 525 or you may never check out. There's also an eerie painting that's said to be inhabited by the spirit of a young girl, the daughter of a senator, whose expression seems to change on its own. People who view the painting have said that they feel like they were floating off of the ground, though they remained on the floor. They also say that their equilibrium and balance was off for a few hours after looking at her. Number 9. USS Lexington, Corpus Christi. Now before I tell you about this spooky ship, make sure to hit the subscribe button so you can catch all of our amazing videos. As a naval vessel that saw actual battle, there have been multiple lives that were lost on board, including that of an engine room operator who still roams the ship at night waiting for the battle to end. The crew of the ship have often reported flickering lights and doors slamming on their own, which, given that this is a very well-maintained historical site, you'd think that they would have found the cause by now. Maybe it's just the ghosts of sailors lost to time. Coming in at number 8, we have the MARFA lights in, you guessed it, the town of MARFA. While there is so much beauty in the area and plenty of non-spooky reasons to visit, the main tourist attraction to this quaint little town are floating, sourceless lights that seem to change color and even move in the night sky. Many visitors make the journey at all times of year to see the lights, and there's even a yearly festival made in their honor. Reported since 1883 by people of all ages and professions, no one knows what these floating orbs are. They appear at random, but usually in the same area of the sky, and since there's so much open space and low light pollution, it's perfect for stargazing, or seeing spooky orbs, I guess. Some say that these lights are UFOs, some say spirits, and others think that they're just headlights. All that I know is that if I see a mysterious floating orb, I'm going the other way. Number 7. Woman Hollering Creek, San Antonio. Said to be the home of La Llorona, or the Weeping Woman, this creepy creek leaves anyone who visits with a sense of dread. As the story goes, La Llorona was a woman who was distraught that her once doting, affectionate husband left her for another woman. And after confronting him and leaving the confrontation with cuts and bruises, she waded into the water, dressed in her best clothes, and drowned herself in the creek, right after doing the same to the rest of her family. Her chilling screams for her children can be heard all the way from the highway, giving her and the creek its very apt name. Many people have felt themselves being drawn towards the water by ghostly voices, and some have even been tugged towards the bank of the creek. Perhaps it's La Llorona looking for her next victim. The screams heard and feelings of being pulled into the water have mostly been reported by younger people, making this all the more terrifying given what La Llorona did. Number 6. El Paso High School. Now, when you're thinking of haunted places, a school isn't exactly the first place that comes to mind, but this one has quite a story. In 1985, the graduating class received their yearbooks, and when basking in the nostalgia of their group photo, they noticed something odd. A woman who no one could identify was in the picture with them. Now, obviously, that would be quite concerning. I know I'd be freaked out if there was someone I'd never seen before standing next to me in a picture. The blurry apparition still has not been identified to this day, but some think it's a student who fell from a window years before who never got to graduate. I say give her the diploma. She's already in the yearbook. Sticking in El Paso, in our number 5 spot is the Plaza Theater Performing Arts Center. As someone who loves the theater, I try to see as many shows as I can, but I think I'll skip visiting this theater, no matter how good the production is. Built in 1930 as a movie house, demolished for a parking lot in the late 80s, and rebuilt as a live theater space, this building has seen many changes, but some things have stayed constant throughout its history. Many workers of the building have reported seeing a man in one of the box seats, in a tuxedo, smoking a cigarette. One crew member recalls seeing him after turning on the stage lights, sitting alone in the box, as though he'd been there for hours already before the lights came on. And when she saw the smoking man, he turned to her and said, "We all have our time to die," and then threw himself headfirst over the balcony, vanishing before he could hit the ground. A former vice president of the theater also recalls seeing a ghostly girl bouncing a ball in the aisles of the theater and always staring. He also noticed that there was a rag doll that seemed to appear and disappear on its own, moving to locations that it couldn't have without someone's help. Even locked doors didn't seem to stop it from appearing in the projection booth. Number 4. Yorktown Memorial Hospital. Established in 1951, this abandoned hospital has been named one of the most haunted places in America. And since over 2,000 patients are said to have died within its walls before it shuttered its doors in 1992, I can see why. Reports of apparitions of people in hospital gowns running through the corridors or hiding in rooms are numerous, along with moving wheelchairs, disembodied voices, and footsteps. But there are some who have even more chilling stories. While exploring the halls and rooms that have remained largely untouched since its closure, some ghost hunters have been touched, had their clothes tugged on, or even pushed to the ground while being given a ghostly warning. Some of the spirits are believed to be that of patients who had illegal medical experiments performed on them and lost their lives in the process, making for a very vengeful ghost. Number 3. The Screaming Bridge in Arlington. On the night of February 4th, 1961, 6 from the local high school were taking a drive after seeing a movie earlier in the evening. While driving down Bedford Road toward the rail crossing bridge, which had mysteriously been burned down a few years previous, only rebuilt earlier that year, they were startled by another car reversing and honking its horn wildly. This caused the driver to speed up out of fear, and not realizing that the bridge was out, the car careened over the edge and crashed into the other side of the ravine. Unfortunately, 3 of them lost their lives that night, and their screams of terror can still be heard by anyone traveling the renamed Greenbelt Road. The saddest part of this story is that the car that startled them was being driven by a man who had just barely avoided going over the edge of the broken bridge himself, and he was reversing and honking to warn them of the danger ahead. The entire area, now known as Death Crossing, is now blocked off and no traffic travels through. At number 2 on our list, we have La Carafe in Houston. This historic bar, built originally as a bakery in 1860, has been serving patrons for decades, but many come not only for the drinks, but for a paranormal experience. Bartenders and visitors alike have seen apparitions of a hulking man walking upstairs and hearing his giant footsteps pacing the floor. No one knows who this may be, but some say he died there from some nefarious means. The former manager of the bar can also be seen staring out of the top floor window, looking over his patrons and ensuring they're having a good time. And he seems a bit more friendly. However, there are some that report the sounds of a body being dragged across the floor above, but when the sound is followed, nothing's there. Makes you wonder what happened upstairs. And since it's one of the oldest buildings in the city that's been in continuous use, it's become a tourist hotspot and a historical site. Personally, I won't be stopping in for a drink anytime soon, no matter how good the cocktails are. And finally, number 1, the Alamo. While students are taught to remember the Alamo, they don't really teach about all of the spirits who can never forget. In the infamous battle, thousands of soldiers lost their lives, and many were dumped into mass graves and others left to rot out in the sun, so it makes sense that you'd have some pissed off ghosts wandering the ground. There have been countless reports of soldier apparitions walking with weapons in hand, taking their usual patrol, and even full platoons screaming and charging into battle. Even in the afterlife, they couldn't get away from war, and so they continue to fight their invisible enemy. There are also accounts of a small blonde-haired boy hiding in multiple places where the gift shop now stands, so make sure to pick up your haunted keychains. While the buildings are beautiful to look at and the area is interesting to explore, the history can leave one with a haunting feeling, and with all those spirits around, I'd be careful touring here, especially at night.
Starting us off at number 10, the Toyoma Park. Here in the heart of Tokyo lies one of the most haunted places in Japan. While in the day the park is a lively spot filled with picnics and games, at night it becomes a whole different place. As the story goes, during World War II, this area was used as a dumping ground for many prisoners of war, and their bodies remain buried deep across the park. At night, it's said to become haunted as the spirits rise and terrorize any who enter. Those who have dared hear terrifying shrills only to find no one around them, and many have reported seeing hitodoma, a fiery ball of light that appears when a person's soul has been separated from its body. And it's it's not all myth either. Around 20 years ago, hundreds of bones were unearthed from the park's grounds, and even to this day, fragments of victims are slowly being brought to the surface. Next up at number 9, Sunshine 60. Before it was one of Tokyo's tallest skyscrapers, the land where the Sunshine 60 sits was occupied by a terrifying prison. Sugamo Prison, as it was known, held anarchists, communists, and prisoners of war during the American occupation of Japan, and its infamy comes from the 7 war criminals, one of which was a former prime minister, who were executed on the site. After the prison closed, the public was disturbed to find out they planned on building an entertainment complex on the land, but still the development continued as planned. It's believed the 7 men haunt the building, and over the years there have been countless paranormal sightings of strange apparitions and noises when no one was around. Most disturbing of all, it's said that at night, strange fireballs can be seen floating around the building, terrifying any who happen to be near. Next up at number 8, Oya Shrine. As the legend goes, there was once a woman named Yotsuya who married a masterless samurai. One day she receives a cream that she suspects to be a gift from her husband, but after she uses it, she realizes it was poisonous. Yotsuya, seeing how the cream has disfigured her face, becomes hysterical and accidentally takes her own life while running with a sword. Yotsuya then returns as a revengeful ghost to avenge her death and terrorize her husband for what he did to her. The story was the basis for Yotsuya Kaiden, one of Japan's most infamous ghost stories, and over the years, many strange and inexplicable accidents have occurred at the site. Even today, casts that put on productions of the story go to get permission from the woman's grave so as not to be haunted by her for the rest of eternity. Next up at number 7, Zoshigaya Cemetery. While many places seem to just get spooky after the sun goes down, the Zoshigaya Cemetery is feared at all hours of the day. Those who have dared to visit the site claim to have witnessed strange faces and white hands appearing out of the trees, and 3 people have actually been known to take their own life while on the grounds. Their spirits are thought to haunt the grounds along with many other souls buried deep. As with many other haunted sites, you can hear strange noises if you dare to enter, but the most disturbing occurrence is from several reports of people experiencing temporary paralysis while strolling through the cemetery. Many that have dared to visit once have never returned, in fear that something even worse could happen if they step foot on the property again. Coming in at number 6, the DORYODO Temple. After the tragic killing of an 81-year-old woman in 1963, the DORYODO Temple was thought to be cursed and would never be the same again. It closed after the incident, and people immediately kept away from it, fearing the woman would haunt the temple and terrorize those who visited. Then, later in 1973, the body of a missing college student was found there, and it was later discovered her professor, who she was having an affair with, took her life, then set fire to the temple in an attempt to hide the evidence, leaving behind only demolished remains at the site. The name DORYODO roughly means end of the road temple, and over the years of incidents, locals have interpreted it to mean that this is the last place you'll be seen alive. So enter if you dare, you might still hear the screams of those whose last days were at this very spot. Coming in at number 5, Ireto. Back in 1923, Ireto was the place where many took refuge during the Great Kanto earthquake. Sadly, as the time of the earthquake was when many were cooking in their homes, huge fires broke out all across the city and not many survived. The site was used as a makeshift crematorium where an estimated 38,000 body remains lay, and then, after World War II, a memorial hall was constructed as a place to bury victims from the war. Riddled with ghosts from the tragic earthquake and the war, it's no wonder the hall is believed to be haunted by many of the locals. People walking nearby have reported hearing strange and uncanny noises, and even apparitions of those presumed to have died here all those years ago. Next up at number 4, the Akasaka Weekly Mansion. Although it is a luxury hotel, AKASAKA Mansion is also one of the most horrifying places to spend your night. Patrons have reported countless paranormal activities like strange white mists suddenly appearing from the vents and being grabbed while in bed in the middle of the night. Appliances and lights are known to mysteriously turn on and off independently, but the most terrifying of all is the one account of a woman who said she was actually dragged across the room by a terrifying spirit, and she has the scratch marks along her back to prove it. So unless you are looking to be grabbed in your sleep by a terrifying demon and dragged around the floors of your hotel, I think it's best to stay away from the AKASAKA Mansion and book elsewhere. Next up at number 3, the MASAKADOS grave. While it's not uncommon to assume a grave could be haunted, this one is especially disturbing. MASAKADOS grave is the resting place of an ancient angry samurai rebel. As the legend goes, he was decapitated and his head was left on display at a riverbank. For months its eyes remained open and its teeth grinding, showing no sign of decomposition. Those who passed the head would claim to hear it screeching or yelling, calling out for whoever did this to them to show themselves. Then mysteriously, one day the head disappeared from the riverbank and made its way from Kyoto all the way to Tokyo, where it supposedly rests to this day. It has long been believed that anyone who disturbs the gravesite will be cursed for all eternity and risks serious injury or even death. In the past, people have tested the curse and attempted to build on the site, but plans have always cancelled as workers kept mysteriously dying out of nowhere. So what do you think? Are you brave enough to visit the site to see for yourself if the curse is real? Coming in at number 2, the KOMINE Tunnel. In 1989, a cannibal and killer took the life of a young woman and left her mutilated body near the KOMINE Tunnel, and ever since, no one dares to return to the area. Locals believe the girl haunts the spot, and frequent reports have been made witnessing the ghost lurking around the tunnel. Some hear noises, some feel a cool chill down their spine, but all that enter feel a strange sensation that they are not alone. The locals were so terrified to visit this spot that the government actually built a new tunnel in 2006 to avoid ever needing to go near it again. One account of a cyclist who accidentally found himself by the tunnel stated he felt something cold and wet grab his ankle, but that nothing was there. Frightened it was the ghost of the girl, he started to run away but could still feel her hands on him, and his leg went completely frozen. To this day, paranormal investigators frequent the haunted tunnel hoping to catch the ghost on camera, but none have been successful. And in our number 1 spot, the Himuro Mansion. Many years ago, this mansion was owned by a very rich family that practiced the occult. Now, as the story goes, a part of their practice was something called the strangling ritual, in which a maiden that had been isolated from birth would be bound at every limb point, and then the ends of those ropes would be attached to 5 oxen, who, when cued, would run and dismember the woman. The ropes would then be soaked in her blood and placed over a portal they believed would keep bad karma away for 50 years. Kind of ironic considering this feels like it would cause their bad karma, but what do I know? Now, as you probably guessed, this particular ceremony did not go as planned, as the chosen maiden had snuck away and met a lover and therefore had not been isolated and was impure and unfit for the ritual. Legend says the lover came to the maiden's rescue during the ritual, and the head of the family decided the solution for all of this was to take the life of all 7 members of his family and then himself. To this day, the mansion is believed to be haunted by the souls of the Himuro family, and visitors that walk past may just hear the screeching voices of a maiden. But be careful, it is said the souls will try to entice visitors to complete their ritual from all those years ago.